For months, they lived like housemates, two people who shared a roof, shared appearances, shared headlines, but nothing else. Rose had made her intentions crystal clear, not with words, but with a kind of silence that spoke volumes. She wasn't going to chase conversation or play pretend behind the cameras. She didn't hate him, no, but she refused to feed the illusion that she wanted this marriage more than she was forced into it. She didn't ask questions when he left the house. She didn't wait up. She didn't flinch when he walked past her in the hallway. Her indifference was her armor, and her message, "You might be the kind of man women chase, but I won't be one of them." And Jae-ho noticed. At first, he didn't care. Or so he told himself. He had bigger things to worry about: boardroom meetings, investor calls, family expectations. But in the quiet moments, when he passed the living room and heard her laughing over FaceTime with her best friend in New York, when she walked past him in those dangerously short skirts, without sparing a glance, it started to get under his skin. Then came the night that changed everything. They were at a private art exhibit in Seoul. It was a public event, the type where appearances mattered more than anything else. Rose showed up in a wine-colored two-piece that hugged her like a second skin, heels clicking, eyes sparkling. As always, her presence turned heads. He stood beside her, playing the role he had mastered, silent, unreadable, composed. But all of that fell apart when a voice called her name from across the gallery. Rosie. She turned and lit up. A tall, well-dressed man walked toward her, eyes wide with recognition. Her gasp was followed by the kind of hug you don't give just anyone. An old-time friend from her early varsity days. They laughed, stumbled over memories, and slid back into the comfort of old times like no time had passed. Her hands brushed the guy's arm as she talked. She leaned in when he whispered something. Her smile was big, genuine, the kind she never gave Jae-ho, not even when they were alone. Something twisted in Jae-ho's chest. Tight. Unfamiliar. He didn't say a word, just watched as she laughed with this stranger, like she wasn't wearing his ring. Like she wasn't his wife, at least in name. They didn't speak in the car. The drive was silent, smooth, and tense, like a held breath waiting to explode. At home, she barely made it through the door before his voice cut through the silence. "Is Madame Rose aware that there are cameras at these events?" he asked, loosening his tie slowly, his tone calm but laced with something darker. "Cameras that don't care if your hugs are friendly or flirtatious. They only need a headline." Rose paused mid-step, heels still on. She turned around, arms folded, one brow raised. "Oh, did the cameras also catch the part where my husband stood 2 feet away and said nothing like a poorly programmed robot?" Her voice was sugar and blade. He didn't flinch. "You're a married woman," she scoffed. "Married?" She took a step closer, tilting her head. "To who? You?" "Oh, pleading." He stayed silent, but his jaw tightened. She wasn't done. "Listen," she said, voice dropping lower, cooler. "I will hug whoever I want. Smile however I like. Because unlike you, I don't walk around like joy is a disease." "And next time," she added, slipping off her earrings one by one, "if you have a problem, don't wait till we're alone to grow a voice. Say it there, next to the cameras. Who knows, they might finally believe this marriage is real." Then she walked away, hips swaying, heels clicking like applause behind her. And he just stood there, silent, watching, burning. There was something about the way she laughed. Not at his jokes, he rarely told any, but at everyone else's. On the phone in the hallway, during those sleek company dinners filled with chatter and clinking glasses. She would toss her head back, her shoulders trembling with joy, lips parted in a way that made the room around her brighter, like she was born for spotlights and center stages. And Jae-ho watched. From the corners of rooms, from across the car, from the head of the table. He watched her laugh like she'd forgotten she was in a contract marriage. Like she wasn't wearing a ring from a man she barely spoke to at home. It started to press against his chest, an unfamiliar tightness that refused to go away. Not pain, not quite jealousy, just a constant ache whenever her joy wasn't for him. He would hear her sometimes, her voice floating down the hallway when she was on a call.
Sweet.
excited, animated, words rolling out like honey.
Who was she talking to?
He never asked. He never had the right to. But he wondered. Wondered what it would take to make her speak like that to him. Wondered what kind of man was on the other end, making her smile so wide the sound of it lit up the space between their separate rooms. And then came the dinner. It was one of those formal, tension-wrapped evenings at his father's house. The board members were present. So were family friends. Cameras were banned, but whispers traveled faster than any headline could. And Rose? She was flawless. A fitted silk dress clung to her like second skin, her curls swept to one side. She laughed easily, made toasts like she meant them, and when she leaned close to him with a soft whisper and pressed a peck on his cheek, his breath caught. Her lips barely touched his skin, but his whole body reacted. And for a split second, the room faded. He turned slightly, just slightly, toward her, as though his lips might catch hers next, as though the contract could be forgotten, rewritten, destroyed. But she had already turned back to the table, raising a glass like nothing happened. That effortless charm, that public warmth, that damn smile. He exhaled hard through his nose and reached for his water, silently scolding himself. Don't be foolish. Don't fall. This wasn't love. This wasn't marriage. It was a performance, a well-rehearsed act that she played like a queen on a gilded stage. And he, the silent figure beside her, was just another prop. But even props could break. Even masks could crack. And that night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he found himself imagining how her laughter might sound if it were meant for him. Not the cameras, not the crowd, just him. And that thought scared him more than any headline ever could. Sitting behind the vast glass desk in his office, with 1,000 unread emails and a boardroom full of decisions waiting, he wasn't thinking of business. He was thinking of her, of how she laughed when she was on the phone, loud and open, like life was a party she never wanted to leave. He tapped his pen on the table and closed his eyes briefly. Would they ever have a conversation that didn't end with sarcasm or thinly veiled jabs? Would she ever look at him the way she looked at her friends? Warm, relaxed, real? He didn't know what was worse, the fact that she never smiled at him that way, or the fact that he wanted her to. When he got home that evening, the apartment was lit softly. Her heels were by the door, her glittery handbag tossed on the console. She was home first, as usual. He walked down the hall slowly, his hand loosening his tie, his mind in a mess of meetings and missed opportunities. Then he heard her. Her voice, raised, sharp, angry, drifted from her room. Ruthie, if I have to see that face for one more month, I'll scream. A pause. No, I'm not being dramatic. He's so cold. Like a wall. It's exhausting just breathing in the same space. He stopped in front of the closed door. The wall between them wasn't very thick. He could hear her pacing. Sometimes I wake up and wonder if I can just pack my things and disappear, she continued, frustration leaking through every word. This contract is the worst decision I've ever made, but I didn't have a choice, okay? So no, don't tell me to be patient. I just want the months to go faster. His chest tightened. He took a slow step backward, then another. By the time he reached his own room, her voice was fading, but the words, her words, stayed loud in his head. Is that how much she truly hates me? He stared at his reflection in the mirror as he changed into his nightshirt, the fabric cool against his skin. His jaw was tight, his eyes tired. He had never asked her to love him, never even expected it. But to be hated so openly, it hit harder than he expected. He lay down, but sleep didn't come. The sheets felt colder than usual. The silence of the room pressed down on him like a weight. Maybe she was right, he thought bitterly. Maybe I am a wall. But walls don't bleed. His tongue felt heavy, his throat dry. There was a taste, bitter, unfamiliar. Rejection, maybe. Or regret. He rolled to his side, pulling the blanket higher. He didn't understand why it mattered. He had built empires without feelings. Navigated ruthless boardrooms. Cut ties without blinking. So why did a girl with glittery lashes and savage comebacks make his world feel off balance? Why did her voice echo louder than his own thoughts? Why did he care that she didn't care? The worst part wasn't her words. It was that she didn't even try to hide them. That's how little he meant to her. That's how transparent her hatred was. And yet, the next morning, she would wear her gloss and slip her hand into the crook of his arm. She would smile like a girl in love. She would laugh for the cameras. She would give him that practiced peck on the cheek in front of the world. And he would let her. Because that was the deal. Even if it was breaking him, piece by silent piece. It was one of those nights. She stayed up late. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Rose padded down the staircase barefoot, the cold marble floor making her shiver slightly. She had tossed and turned for hours, her throat dry from the heating. She needed water, just water, and then she would vanish back to her room. But as she reached the kitchen, she stopped. There, slouched by the kitchen island under the dim golden lights, was Jae-ho. Not the polished, reserved man she was used to. This Jae-ho had his jacket tossed carelessly on a chair, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, one hand buried in his hair. A half-drunk glass of something clear, water, maybe vodka, sat untouched beside him. His phone was on the counter, screen dark, forgotten. He didn't notice her immediately. His gaze was blank, staring at the far wall like it held answers to questions too heavy to ask. For a second, Rose thought about retreating quietly, but something in her stilled her steps. Something about seeing him, the heir, the empire's golden boy, looking beaten. Without a word, she moved to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned casually against the counter opposite him. "You look like hell," she said softly, the closest thing to concern she could manage without losing her pride. His head turned toward her, slow, heavy. For once, he didn't have a biting reply ready. He just smiled, a crooked, tired thing that didn't reach his eyes. "Rough day at the office," he murmured. She twisted the cap off her bottle, took a sip. "Rough enough to drink water, like it's whiskey?" He huffed a weak laugh, the sound of a man who didn't have the energy to fake anything. She watched him for a moment longer, then said, "You're not good at losing." He tilted his head, studying her. "Neither are you." A small smirk played on her lips. "Difference is, I don't pretend it doesn't bother me." There was a beat of silence. He dragged a hand down his face, the action almost boyish in its frustration. "My father's deal in Shanghai collapsed tonight," he said. "Millions gone. Years of work." His voice was steady, but she could hear the bitterness underneath. The exhaustion. The disappointment. And somehow, he continued, voice barely a whisper, "I'm the one who has to fix it." Rose leaned back against the counter, folding her arms. "You're allowed to be human, you know," she said casually. He looked at her, almost startled, like the thought had never occurred to him. "You don't always have to be the son your father built," she added, voice soft but sure. A long silence stretched between them, thick and crackling with something unfamiliar. Something not hate, not even indifference, understanding. For the first time, Rose saw him, really saw him, not as the cold husband she was tied to, but as a man barely holding his world together with fraying hands. And Jae-ho, for the first time, saw her not as the flamboyant girl who mocked the idea of this marriage, but as someone who could see through the armor he wore too tightly. He dropped his gaze first, fiddling with the edge of his glass. "You should get back to bed," he said, voice rough. She stayed a second longer, finishing her water. Then she pushed off the counter, her eyes never leaving his tired figure. "Next time you want to pretend you're invincible," she said, heading for the stairs, "at least sit somewhere less pathetic." A glimmer of amusement flickered in his exhausted eyes as she disappeared. And for the first time in a long, brutal night, Jae-ho felt something unexplainable rise in his chest, something dangerously close to hope. Morning broke in pale gold through the wide windows, casting long slants of light across the house. Rose was already in the kitchen, lazily scrolling through her phone while waiting for her coffee to brew. She wore a simple hoodie and shorts, nothing glamorous, nothing for show. Just her, real and unguarded. She didn't hear him at first, the soft thud of footsteps behind her. But somehow, her body sensed him. She glanced over her shoulder, and there he was. Jae-ho. He looked better. Still tired around the eyes, but there was a steadiness in him this morning that hadn't been there last night. His suit was half done, tie slung loosely around his neck, jacket missing. He was heading to the office, clearly, but for now, he was just a man standing awkwardly in his own kitchen. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Neither spoke. But something passed between them, silent and thick. The memory of the midnight. The vulnerability shared. The fragile thread that neither dared to pull on, yet both felt humming under their skin. "Coffee's fresh," she said casually, turning back to her phone like she hadn't noticed the way he was still staring at her. He moved without thinking, reaching for a mug. As he poured himself a cup, he risked a glance at her. She wasn't smiling like she did outside for the cameras. She wasn't rolling her eyes or throwing one of her savage comments. She was just there. Real. Present. And he realized, with a strange ache, that he preferred this version of her, the quiet, messy one who wore oversized hoodies and didn't bother to hide her yawns. He cleared his throat, breaking the strange heaviness between them. About last night, he started, voice low. Rose's hand paused on her phone screen, but she didn't look up. "You were tired." "It happens," she said smoothly, saving him from the awkwardness he wasn't built to handle. He gave a short nod, even though the words sitting on his tongue were heavier. "Thank you. I'm sorry. Stay." None of them made it out. She finally looked up, her eyes sharp and clear, like she could see the battle inside him. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Perfect," she said with a small, dry smile. "I'm not your therapist. Or your wife. The corner of his mouth lifted in something dangerously close to a real smile. Not the plastic ones he wore for press photos. A real, human smile. He took a sip of the coffee. Winced. Too bitter. She laughed under her breath, shaking her head. "You rich boys," she muttered. "Can't even brew decent coffee." He watched her gather her phone and head for the stairs. No dramatic goodbyes. No lingering glances. No forced sweetness. Just life. Normal, imperfect, maddeningly magnetic life. As she disappeared up the stairs, Jae-ho found himself standing alone in the kitchen, the taste of bitter coffee on his tongue, and something much sweeter lodged in his chest. He didn't know what they were, what they could be, but for the first time in months, he wasn't entirely sure he wanted this to just be a contract. Not when he was just starting to really see her.